Everyone, Happy New Year. Wanted to take a few minutes to discuss some really important from a teaching perspective. It's not particularly from an application skill development perspective primarily. This is, I think, from the perspective of teaching, these are some important topics that lead to effective skill development practices. So, a lot of principles come in pairs or sets of three. And a lot of these are sets of three. So last video we talked about principles and examples and skills and how those interplay. One of the things I wanted to bring up and talk about in more detail, because I really kind of glossed over this in the book, is the concept of backwards planning. Backwards planning is a concept I was introduced to first from Kevin Halloran through his military background. Backwards planning is very common practice in the Army, probably in the other divisions of the military as well. But and then I was also introduced to it in much more depth when I was recommended the book called Understanding by Design by Sensei Marcus Davila. So they talk about it from an educational perspective, and from a teacher's perspective, I mentioned in the book how the process that a teacher and a student go through are essentially the opposite. A teacher, essentially, if you've ever taken a maze and instead of starting at the beginning, started at the end and work your way back to the beginning, in my opinion, that's the process that a teacher goes through, and then the student experiences that the natural way, from the beginning of the maze, from the start to the exit. And so when I say the teacher does that backwards, what I'm saying is the teacher clearly identifies their goals. In our case, that may be the application of principles. It usually is. So let's say there's a principle, or actually better yet, a skill set that supports a principle or is driven by a principle would be the goal. Once the goal is clearly identified, test procedures are identified. And those tests would be something like, student can perform this drill with an 80% or higher accuracy rating at full speed. Something of that nature. So take a drill, indicate the success measure, and note that for the student. And only then should you, as a teacher, go to the stage that we typically prefer to go to first, which is develop the curricula for, the lesson plans and the particular skill sets and the activities the student will actually go through. So essentially the idea is know exactly where you want to go, determine if you can tell how close the student is to achieving that, and only when you're done with that, develop some methods for getting close to being able to pass the tests. So that, in a nutshell, is backwards planning, and it's useful. The domain of use is incredibly wide. You can use these in business settings, when any kind of project you're doing, engineering, many applications for the concept of backwards planning. So backwards planning can also support some of the other concepts that we talk about from an educational perspective. So when we think about how a student often learns, and there are many models for learning, but a good model of learning, described again in that book called Understanding by Design, that's a textbook for educators, talks about the stages of learning for the student being that the student will learn a discrete piece of information as presented to them. Then it's important to give that student a better understanding of that material, usually by applying additional context. Multiple forms of context, increasing amount of detail in that situation, so that they can better understand what that is good for and not good for in context. And then lastly, the idea being the ability to transfer that skill set into other settings, the other contexts not previously engaged in the classroom. So the idea being, when you get on the street, your skill sets then transfer to scenarios that you may not have trained in or practiced. And so you could call that apply as well. And because we use transfer as a bridging term, we typically in the book are using the word apply here. So again, we're talking about small bits of information in isolation. We're talking about understanding those bits of information in a broader and multiple contexts, and then finding out more domains and understanding how to detect and apply in domains outside of domain or context being the same idea, being able to apply that skill set in varying places. So, how does that matter from skill development perspective? Again, we talk further in the book about 3 more stages of training. So these would be the 3 stages starting for the teacher in the development of curriculum: develop the goal, develop the tests, develop the lesson plans. The 3 stages of learning for the student would be knowing small things, understanding those small things better, and how they apply to other things, and link and connect, and how they're affected by context, and then how to, at the point of growth at this stage, you would hope that they would have enough information to develop new context value judgments on their own. So when the teacher provides these opportunities for learning, what the recommendation is to support these abilities, to support the stages of learning, is to provide isolated skill development, to then provide the student with options to link and combine and switch between skill sets in the correct context, this being a tremendously valuable portion of the training, and then also provide things like open platforms, free sparring, irikumi, sticky hands, various kinds of free play and experimentation opportunities. We call that the laboratory, those kinds of things, so that they can fully understand their ability to apply. They will find new places to use existing or new skill sets when given the opportunity. So these concepts around backwards planning and the stages of learning are talked about really around pages 13, 15 in that area of the book. The concept of developing your curriculum to support those stages of learning is discussed on starting on page 219. And one of these, we're all very familiar with things like isolated drills. So isolated drills could be, again, that proper hand drill where we're randomly getting the appropriate hand on so that we can support a flank. The example in the book that we give for this kind of drilling relates to managing obstructions. So what we give is a 3-part drill, and the feeder, the coach, the partner, not the one learning the skill set, but the one throwing the blocks, gives a different range and angle of the block. So if I were to, as the attacker, I'm going to punch, but I'm the person learning the skill, my goal is to move around obstacles or manage them. First, we punch, we're blocked below our elbow, so that's the trigger that we roll our elbow. Second, we punch, and we're blocked at the elbow, probably across or into our center. In that case, we pull back, open the center, and then re-hit. Lastly, if we're pushed deep into the elbow and maybe down, we flow around and hit from the outside. So that's an example of one drill, the goal of which is to develop the skill set of managing and clearing obstructions. There are 3 examples, each driven by a particular context that should drive the correct application of the skill set, and correctly doing that in multiple opportunities should provide a good, clean test for the teacher. Anyhow, I hope that gives some more insight, particularly into backwards planning, making sure that it's very clear what these 3 stages of learning are, and how your curriculum can support very cleanly those stages of that student's learning. Let me know if you have any questions or what your next topic would like to be. Happy New Year.